racist surgeon publicly humiliates a black nurse, not knowing she's the new chief of staff. Isolde Dubois stood in the bustling emergency room of City General Hospital, her heart racing as she navigated the chaos around her. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a harsh glow on the scene. Patients filled the waiting area, some clutching their sides in pain, others anxiously tapping their feet. Isolde moved with purpose, her years of experience guiding her through the frenetic energy of the ER. "Isolde, we need a stat on room 3, called out a fellow nurse, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of beeping machines and murmured conversations. "On it," Isolde replied, her voice steady as she grabbed the chart and headed toward the room. She was a force of nature in scrubs, her dark skin glowing against the stark white of her uniform. Years of hard work had earned her respect among her peers, and she was determined to maintain that reputation. As she entered room 3, she found a young man writhing on the gurney, his face pale and drenched in sweat. "What's going on?" Isolde asked, her tone calm and reassuring. "I think I'm having a heart attack," he gasped, clutching his chest. "Let's get you stabilized," Isolde said, quickly assessing the situation. She called for the doctor on duty, her hands moving deftly as she prepared the necessary equipment. The adrenaline coursed through her veins, sharpening her focus. Just as she was about to start an IV, the door swung open and Dr. Victor Sterling strode in, his presence commanding immediate attention. He was a renowned surgeon, known for his skill, but also for his arrogance. Isolde had heard the whispers about his temper and his tendency to belittle staff, especially those he deemed beneath him. "Isolde, what are you doing?" Victor snapped, his voice dripping with condescension. "You're wasting time. This patient needs immediate attention." Isolde felt a familiar knot tighten in her stomach. She had dealt with Victor's condescending attitude before, but today she was determined not to let it rattle her. "I'm preparing to administer fluids, Dr. Sterling. The patient is in distress, and I'm following protocol." Victor's eyes narrowed, and he stepped closer, his voice lowering to a menacing whisper. "Protocol? You think you know better than me? You're just a nurse. Stay in your lane." The words stung, but Isolde held her ground. "I'm doing my job, Dr. Sterling. We need to work together to save this patient." Victor's face flushed with anger, and he turned to the patient, dismissing Isolde with a wave of his hand. "You don't need to listen to her. I'll take over from here." Isolde's heart raced as she stepped back, feeling the weight of humiliation settle over her. The patient looked between them, confusion etched on his face. "Wait, what's happening?" "Just relax," Victor said, his tone brusque. "I'm the doctor here. You'll be fine." As Victor began barking orders, Isolde felt a surge of frustration. She had dedicated her life to nursing, and here was a man who thought he could undermine her authority with a few harsh words. But she knew better than to engage in a public confrontation. Instead, she took a deep breath and stepped outside the room, her mind racing. In the hallway, Isolde leaned against the cool wall, trying to steady her breathing. She could hear Victor's voice rising above the din of the ER, and she felt a mix of anger and helplessness. This wasn't the first time she had faced discrimination in her career, but it was the first time it had happened so publicly in front of a patient and her colleagues. "Isolde!" a voice called out, breaking her from her thoughts. It was Lennox Gray, a fellow nurse and friend. "Are you okay?" "No," Isolde admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Victor just humiliated me in front of a patient. I can't believe he would do that." Lennox's expression hardened. "He's a jerk, you know that, but you're better than him. Don't let him get to you." "I know, but it's hard," Isolde replied, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "I've worked so hard to earn respect here, and he just undermined everything in a matter of seconds." "Let's talk to the supervisor," Lennox suggested, his tone firm. "You shouldn't have to put up with that kind of behavior." Isolde hesitated, torn between the desire to confront Victor and the fear of the repercussions. What if it backfires? What if they don't believe me? "They will believe you," Lennox insisted. "You're a great nurse, Isolde. You deserve to be treated with respect." As they spoke, Isolde felt a flicker of determination ignite within her. She had spent years fighting against the biases in the healthcare system, and she wasn't about to let Victor's arrogance derail her career. "You're right, I need to stand up for myself." With renewed resolve, Isolde and Lennox made their way to the supervisor's office. The air felt charged with tension as they approached the door. Isolde's heart raced, but she knew she had to speak up. "Come in," the supervisor called, and Isolde pushed the door open, her stomach churning with anxiety. "Isolde Lennox, what can I do for you?" the supervisor asked, looking up from her desk. "Dr. Sterling just publicly humiliated Isolde in the ER," Lennox said, his voice steady. "We think it's important to address this behavior." The supervisor's expression shifted to concern. "What happened?" Isolde took a deep breath, recounting the incident with as much composure as she could muster. She described Victor's condescending remarks and how they had undermined her authority in front of a patient. As she spoke, she could feel the weight of her words, the truth of her experience resonating in the room. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," the supervisor said, her tone sympathetic. "We take these matters seriously. I'll speak with Dr. Sterling and ensure this doesn't happen again." Isolde nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "Thank you. I just want to be able to do my job without being undermined." "Of course," the supervisor replied. "You're a valuable member of this team, Isolde. We'll make sure you're treated with the respect you deserve." As Isolde and Lennox left the office, Isolde felt a sense of empowerment wash over her. She had taken a stand, and while she knew the road ahead might be difficult, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But as she returned to the ER, the tension in the air was palpable. Victor was still in room 3, and Isolde could hear his voice rising above the others. She steeled herself, knowing she would have to confront him again soon. In the coming days, the incident would ripple through the hospital, igniting conversations about respect and equality in the workplace. Isolde was determined to be at the forefront of that change, ready to challenge the status quo and fight for her place in a system that had long been resistant to diversity. As she prepared for the next shift, Isolde felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was not just a nurse, she was a leader, and she would not let anyone take that away from her. The days following the incident with Dr. Victor Sterling passed in a blur for Isolde Dubois. She felt as if she were walking a tightrope, balancing her responsibilities as a nurse while grappling with the fallout from Victor's humiliation. Whispers echoed through the corridors of City General Hospital, and Isolde could feel the eyes of her colleagues on her. Some were supportive, while others whispered behind closed doors, unsure of how to navigate the brewing tension. Each shift brought new challenges, but Isolde remained focused on her patients, determined to provide the best care possible despite the storm brewing around her. She worked diligently, her hands moving with precision as she administered medication and comforted anxious patients. But the shadow of Victor's condescension loomed large, and with every encounter, she felt the sting of his words. One afternoon, as Isolde prepared to check in on a patient recovering from surgery, she overheard a conversation between two nurses in the break room. They were discussing the recent incident, their voices hushed but filled with curiosity. "Did you hear about Isolde and Victor? I can't believe he would do that," one nurse said, shaking her head. "She's one of the best nurses we have." "Yeah, but he's so well respected. It's hard to believe he'd act like that," the other replied, casting a furtive glance toward Isolde, who was standing just outside the door. Isolde's heart raced as she caught snippets of their conversation. The support was comforting, but the doubt lingered. She had known the risks of confronting someone like Victor, a man with powerful connections in the hospital. He was a top surgeon, and she was just a nurse. The imbalance of power weighed heavily on her shoulders. Determined to not let fear dictate her actions, Isolde sought out her friend Lennox Gray during a brief moment of respite. They found a quiet corner of the hospital, away from prying eyes. "Isolde, you've been quiet lately," Lennox remarked, concern etched on his face. "Are you all right?" "I'm managing," Isolde replied, forcing a smile, "but I can't shake the feeling that this is far from over. Victor isn't the type to back down easily." Lennox nodded, his expression serious. "You did the right thing by reporting him, but you need to prepare yourself for his reaction. He's not going to let this go without a fight." "I know," Isolde sighed, rubbing her temples. "I just don't want this to become a bigger issue. I want to focus on my patients, not on office politics." "Isolde, you have every right to stand your ground," Lennox said firmly. "You deserve respect, and you've earned it through your hard work. Don't let anyone take that away from you." As they spoke, Isolde felt the weight of her friend's words. She had spent years building her reputation, and she refused to allow Victor's arrogance to overshadow her accomplishments. But with each passing day, the tension in the hospital grew, and she knew Victor was not one to let his ego be bruised. That evening, as Isolde left the hospital, she spotted Victor standing by the entrance, talking to several of his colleagues. The group laughed heartily, but Isolde could see the way they glanced in her direction. She quickened her pace, unwilling to engage in whatever game Victor was playing. Once outside, she took a deep breath of the cool evening air, trying to shake off the anxiety that had settled within her. But as she walked to her car, she felt a sense of dread creeping up her spine. Victor was not just a surgeon. He was a maestro of manipulation and intimidation, and she knew he would find a way to retaliate. Over the next few days, Isolde braced herself for the inevitable confrontation. She prepared herself mentally, reviewing her notes and patient charts, reminding herself of her worth. She had faced challenges before, and she could face this one too. But as she arrived for her shift one morning, she was met with an unexpected sight. The hospital's break room was filled with staff gathered around a bulletin board, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. Isolde's heart raced as she approached the crowd, her instincts telling her something was amiss. "What happened?" she asked one of the nurses, her voice steady despite the unease churning in her stomach. "Did you see this?" the nurse replied, pointing to a notice pinned to the board. "They're holding a staff meeting to address workplace behavior and professionalism. It's about the incident with you and Dr. Sterling." Isolde's breath caught in her throat. "What? They're addressing this in a meeting?" "Yeah, it's scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. I guess they want to get to the bottom of things," the nurse explained, concern etched on her face. "But you know Victor won't take this lying down." Isolde felt the weight of the situation settle heavily on her shoulders. She had expected backlash from Victor, but she hadn't anticipated the hospital administration taking such a public approach. It felt like a double-edged sword. While she appreciated the attention to the issue, she knew it would only escalate the tension between her and Victor. "How are you feeling about it?" Lennox asked, joining Isolde's side as they read the notice together. "I'm nervous," Isolde admitted. "I want to address this and stand up for myself, but I'm worried about what Victor might do." "You can't let him intimidate you," Lennox urged, his voice firm. "You're not alone in this. We'll all support you." That night, Isolde lay awake, her mind racing with possibilities. She rehearsed what she would say at the meeting, determined to articulate her experience without letting Victor's behavior overshadow her professionalism. She could already envision the scene, the room filled with colleagues, Victor sitting smugly in the corner, waiting for the moment to pounce. The next day, as Isolde walked into the staff meeting, she felt a mixture of apprehension and determination. The conference room buzzed with chatter, and she took a seat near the front, her heart pounding. The hospital's CEO entered, calling the room to order. "Thank you all for coming. We're here today to address recent incidents regarding workplace behavior and the importance of maintaining professionalism in our hospital." Isolde glanced at Victor, who sat at the back, arms crossed and a scowl etched on his face. It was clear he was not pleased to be under scrutiny, but she knew he would try to deflect the attention away from himself. As the meeting progressed, Isolde listened closely as the CEO outlined the hospital's commitment to fostering a respectful workplace. When it was time for questions, Isolde felt her heart race as she raised her hand. "Isolde Dubois, RN," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I'd like to address the situation that occurred between Dr. Sterling and myself in the ER. I believe it's crucial to discuss how we can foster a culture of respect." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, and Isolde felt a surge of support. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "During a recent shift, I was publicly humiliated by Dr. Sterling in front of a patient. His comments were not only unprofessional, but also racially charged." Victor shifted in his seat, a storm brewing behind his eyes. "That's not how it happened," he interjected, his voice dripping with disdain. "Isolde is exaggerating." The room fell silent, tension crackling in the air. Isolde met Victor's gaze, refusing to back down. "I have witnesses who can corroborate my account. This behavior is damaging to our team and undermines the care we provide to our patients." The CEO nodded. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Isolde. We take these matters seriously and will investigate further." As the meeting continued, Isolde felt a sense of empowerment wash over her. She had taken a stand, and while Victor was still looming in the background, she knew she had allies in the room. The seeds of change were beginning to take root, and she was ready to fight for a more inclusive and respectful hospital environment. The aftermath of the staff meeting lingered in Isolde Dubois' mind like the echo of a thunderclap. She had spoken her truth, and the support she felt from her colleagues was both empowering and invigorating. Yet she also sensed the storm brewing in the distance. Victor Sterling would not take the scrutiny lightly. His arrogance had been wounded, and she braced herself for the fallout. Over the following days, the atmosphere in City General Hospital grew tense. Whispers filled the hallways, and Isolde couldn't shake the feeling that Victor was plotting his next move. She continued to focus on her patients, her steadfast dedication serving as a shield against the chaos surrounding her. Each day, she donned her scrubs with purpose, reminding herself that she was more than just a nurse. She was a leader in the making. One afternoon, Isolde was in the break room when she overheard a conversation between two doctors. They were discussing the recent meeting, their voices hushed but charged with energy. "Did you see how Victor reacted? He was furious," one doctor remarked, shaking his head. "I can't believe Isolde had the guts to call him out like that." "Yeah, but it's about time someone did," the other replied. "He's been riding high for too long, thinking he can do whatever he wants. It's refreshing to see someone stand up to him." Isolde felt a swell of pride at their words, but it was quickly overshadowed by a sense of foreboding. She knew Victor was capable of retaliation, and she resolved to stay vigilant. That evening, she met with Lennox to discuss their next steps. "Lennox, have you noticed the tension in the air?" Isolde asked as they sat at a nearby cafe, the warm light casting a cozy glow around them. "I can't shake the feeling that Victor is going to retaliate." "I've heard some whispers too," Lennox replied, his brow furrowing. "You're not the only one who's worried. Some staff members are hesitant to take sides, fearing Victor's influence." Isolde nodded, her heart heavy with concern. "I can't let this become a personal vendetta. I want to focus on my patients and the work we do here." "Maybe we should talk to the hospital administration again," Lennox suggested. "If we can show them that this isn't just a personal issue, but a systemic one, they might take more action." Isolde considered this, her mind racing. "You're right. If we can highlight the culture of disrespect that allows Victor's behavior to persist, it could lead to real change." The following day, they approached the hospital's administration with their concerns. Isolde laid out the issues she had witnessed, detailing the toxic culture that had been allowed to fester in the hospital. The administrators listened attentively, but Isolde could sense their reluctance to act decisively against someone as powerful as Victor. "We appreciate you bringing this to our attention, Isolde," one of the administrators said, their tone diplomatic. "But we need concrete evidence to proceed with any action. You understand how these things work." "Concrete evidence?" Isolde echoed, frustration bubbling to the surface. "I have witnesses who can attest to Victor's behavior. This isn't just a matter of personal feelings, it's about creating a safe environment for everyone." The administrator nodded, acknowledging her point. "We will investigate further. Please encourage any witnesses to come forward." Despite the lack of immediate action, Isolde left the meeting feeling empowered. She was determined to push for accountability and change, even if it meant facing Victor head-on. But as the days turned into weeks, the tension in the hospital continued to escalate. One day, while Isolde was preparing medication for a patient, she overheard a heated discussion between Victor and the surgical team in the operating room. His voice boomed through the open door, laced with anger and frustration. "How can you let a nurse dictate how we operate?" Victor spat, his tone filled with contempt. "She has no authority over me. This is a hospital, not a daycare." Isolde's stomach twisted at the sound of his harsh words, but she steeled herself, refusing to back down. She knew she had to confront him, not just for herself, but for every nurse and staff member who had faced his tyranny. Taking a deep breath, Isolde approached the operating room. She felt the weight of her decision, her heart pounding as she stepped into the space where Victor had always held the upper hand. The surgical team paused and turned to look at her, their expressions a mix of surprise and caution. "Dr. Sterling?" Isolde began, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I need to speak with you." Victor turned, his expression a mixture of annoyance and condescension. "What is it, Isolde? I'm quite busy." "I believe we need to discuss your recent comments about nurses and authority," Isolde said, refusing to let his demeanor intimidate her. Victor scoffed, crossing his arms over his chest. "I don't need to explain myself to you. You're just a nurse." "Just a nurse?" Isolde repeated, her voice rising. I am a nurse and I am a valuable member of this team. My role is to ensure the best outcomes for our patients, and that includes advocating for their care. Advocating? Victor sneered. You think you can tell me how to do my job? You're out of your depth. The tension in the room crackled as Isolde's resolve solidified. This isn't about telling you how to do your job. It's about recognizing that we are all part of a team. Your behavior undermines that teamwork and puts our patients at risk. Victor's face darkened with anger. You think you can challenge me? I'm the one who saves lives around here. And I'm the one who helps you do that, Isolde shot back, her voice unwavering. I'm not afraid to speak up for what's right. If you continue to treat staff with disrespect, you will face the consequences. A heavy silence engulfed the room as Isolde's words hung in the air. Victor's eyes blazed with fury, but she could see the flicker of uncertainty behind his bravado. For the first time, he seemed to realize that she was not backing down. Get out of my operating room, Victor growled, his voice low and dangerous. Isolde stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated. I won't back down, Victor. The hospital needs to change, and I'm going to be part of that change. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Victor seething in the operating room. As she stepped into the hallway, she felt a mix of adrenaline and relief. She had taken a stand, and no matter what happened next, she knew she had done the right thing. In the days that followed the confrontation with Victor Sterling, Isolde Dubois felt a shift in the atmosphere around the hospital. Whispers of her bold stand began to circulate, and while some colleagues offered words of encouragement, others remained wary, unsure of how to navigate the increasingly fraught environment. The tension was palpable, but Isolde steeled herself, determined to push for accountability and change. As she entered the break room one afternoon, she found it bustling with nurses and doctors discussing the latest hospital gossip. The air was thick with tension, and Isolde could feel the weight of their gazes as she stepped in. She moved toward the coffee machine, trying to maintain her composure, but the energy in the room was electric with speculation. You're really going to confront him again? One nurse whispered as Isolde filled her cup. Isolde turned to face her. I have to. We can't let his behavior go unchecked. It's not just about me, it's about everyone. A few nods of agreement came from the group, but others exchanged uneasy glances. The divide was clear. Some supported Isolde's courage, while others feared the repercussions of standing up to Victor. As she took a sip of her coffee, Isolde felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see Clara, a junior nurse who had recently joined the team. Clara's eyes were wide, filled with admiration and a hint of anxiety. Isolde, I just wanted to say that what you did in the OR was incredible, Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I could have done that. Thank you, Clara, Isolde replied, touched by the support. It's important to speak up, especially when it's about our patients and our team. I wish more people would stand up like you, Clara said, her voice filled with conviction. We need to change the culture here. Isolde felt a flicker of hope at Clara's words. Maybe this was the beginning of something bigger. But as she prepared to head back to her shift, she spotted Victor across the room, his presence looming like a storm cloud. He was deep in conversation with several high-ranking doctors, and Isolde could see the tension etched on his face. Let's go, Isolde, Lennox said, appearing at her side. You don't need to be around him right now. Isolde nodded, grateful for Lennox's support. You're right. I need to focus on my patients. As they walked back to the ER, Isolde felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. With each passing day, the tension escalated, and it was becoming increasingly clear that Victor was not going to let her stand unchallenged. She could feel the quiet hostility in the air, and she knew she had to be prepared for whatever was coming. That evening, as Isolde finished her shift, she received a text from Lennox. Meet me at the cafe after work. I have news. Curiosity piqued, Isolde quickly changed out of her scrubs and headed to the cafe. When she arrived, she found Lennox seated at a small table, visibly anxious. What's going on? Isolde asked, taking a seat across from him. Have you heard about the investigation? Lennox asked, leaning in closer. No, what investigation? Isolde replied, her heart racing. The hospital is looking into the culture of harassment and discrimination, Lennox explained, his voice low. They're interviewing staff members about their experiences. Isolde's heart skipped a beat. Really? This could be a turning point. Exactly, Lennox said, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. But I also heard that Victor is trying to undermine it. He's been talking to the board, trying to sway opinions in his favor. Isolde felt a surge of anger. Of course he is. He thinks he can bully everyone into silence. We can't let him do that. We need to gather as many testimonies as possible, Lennox urged. If we can show that this isn't just a personal issue, but a systemic one, it might change things. Isolde nodded, her resolve hardening. I'll reach out to anyone who's willing to share their experiences. We need to create a united front. As they plotted their next steps, Isolde's mind raced with possibilities. She knew that gathering testimonies would be a challenge, especially given the fear and hesitation that many of her colleagues felt regarding Victor. But she was determined to fight for change, and she would not back down. The next day, Isolde began her outreach. She approached colleagues one by one, sharing her own experience and encouraging them to speak up about their encounters with Victor. Some were hesitant, worried about potential fallout, while others expressed their support and promised to share their stories. Isolde, I can't thank you enough for what you're doing, one nurse said after recounting her own experience. I've felt so alone in this, but you've given me the courage to speak out. As the days turned into weeks, Isolde collected an array of testimonies, each one a powerful testament to the toxic culture that had taken root in the hospital. She meticulously documented each account, gathering evidence to present to the administration. But as the investigation continued, Victor's retaliation began to escalate. One afternoon, Isolde was in the break room when she overheard Victor speaking with a group of surgeons. His voice dripped with disdain as he belittled her efforts. That nurse thinks she can take me down? She's delusional. I'll make sure she regrets it. Isolde's blood ran cold at the sound of his words. She felt a mix of anger and fear, knowing that Victor would stop at nothing to protect his reputation. But she was determined not to let him intimidate her. That evening, Isolde and Lennox met again to discuss their next steps. They found a quiet corner of the cafe, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the overhead lights. What's the plan, Isolde? Lennox asked, concern etched on his face. Victor is getting more aggressive, and I'm worried about what he might do. I know, Isolde replied, her voice steady, but we can't let fear dictate our actions. We need to present our findings to the administration and push for real change. Lennox nodded, his expression resolute. I'll back you up every step of the way. We can't let him silence us. With renewed determination, Isolde and Lennox prepared to present their evidence to the hospital administration. They knew they were entering a critical moment in their fight against Victor's and the culture of discrimination that had persisted for far too long. On the day of the presentation, Isolde felt a mix of nerves and excitement. She had gathered testimonies from several colleagues, each one a powerful reminder of the need for change. As she and Lennox entered the administration conference room, she steeled herself, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. When they began their presentation, Isolde felt empowered by the support of her colleagues who had come forward. She presented their testimonies, outlining the detrimental effects of Victor's behavior on the hospital's culture and patient care. As they spoke, Isolde could see the expressions of the administrators shift, their attention focused on the gravity of the situation. She felt a surge of hope as she realized that they were listening, truly listening, to the voices that had long been silenced. But just as the presentation was gaining momentum, the door swung open, and Victor strode in, his expression a mask of anger and defiance. "What is the meaning of this?" he thundered, cutting through the room like a knife. Isolde's heart raced as she faced him, adrenaline coursing through her veins. This was the moment she had been preparing for, and she refused to back down. "This is about creating a safe environment for all staff, Victor," Isolde said, her voice steady despite the turbulence. "Your behavior has consequences, and we're here to ensure accountability." Victor's eyes narrowed, and the tension in the room thickened. "You think you can challenge me? I've saved more lives than you can count. Yet you continue to undermine your colleagues," Isolde countered, her voice unwavering. "This isn't just about you. It's about the culture we foster here." The confrontation escalated, and Isolde could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She had taken a stand, and now it was time to see if her courage could lead to real change. The tension in the conference room crackled like a live wire. Isolde Dubois stood at the front, her heart pounding as Victor Sterling glared at her from across the table. In that moment, she couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and determination. The stakes were higher than ever, and she was ready to confront the man who had tried to belittle her at every turn. The administrators sat in a semicircle, their expressions a blend of concern and curiosity. Isolde took a deep breath, grounding herself in the knowledge that she was not alone. Behind her, Lennox Gray stood with a few other colleagues who had come to support her cause. They were all witnesses to Victor's behavior, each one a testament to the toxic culture that had plagued their workplace for far too long. Dr. Sterling, Isolde began, her voice steady, we're here today to address the impact of your actions on the staff and the overall environment of this hospital. Your behavior has not only affected me personally, but has also created a culture of fear among the nursing staff. Victor scoffed, folding his arms across his chest. This is ridiculous. You're just trying to deflect attention from your own incompetence. I've saved lives while you've been busy playing the victim. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the room. Isolde could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, but she refused to let his words shake her resolve. It's not about playing the victim, Victor. It's about accountability. Your comments and treatment of staff undermine our ability to work together effectively. We need a collaborative environment to provide the best care for our patients. The administrators exchanged glances, and one of them, a woman named Dr. Linda Cheng, leaned forward. Victor, what do you have to say about these allegations? Victor's expression hardened. These are just baseless claims from a nurse who thinks she can climb the ladder by making me look bad. I've been in this profession for decades. I know how to run a surgical team. Yet your surgical team is fracturing under the weight of your arrogance. Isolde shot back, her voice unwavering. I've spoken with several staff members who have expressed fear of approaching you or working under you. That is not a healthy work environment. Victor's eyes narrowed as he glared at Isolde. You're overstepping, Dubois. You should know your place. On the contrary, I know exactly where I stand, Isolde replied, her voice gaining strength. I'm a nurse, and I'm here to advocate for my colleagues and our patients. You might have the title, but that doesn't give you the right to demean others. The tension in the room escalated, and Isolde could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Lennox shifted slightly, and she caught his eye, a silent reminder that she had support. Isolde, Dr. Cheng said, her tone calm yet authoritative. We appreciate your perspective, but we need to hear from other staff members as well. This isn't just about one incident, it's about the overall culture in this hospital. With that, the administrators began to call in witnesses to hear their accounts. One by one, nurses and doctors entered the room, sharing their experiences of working under Victor's authority. Their testimonies painted a picture of fear and intimidation, revealing a systemic issue that had long been buried. As Isolde listened to her colleagues speak, she felt a swell of pride. They were finally breaking the silence. Each story added weight to her own, reinforcing the need for change. After several accounts were shared, it was Victor's turn to respond. This is absurd, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. You're all just trying to ruin my reputation because of a few misunderstandings. I am a respected surgeon, and I won't let a group of disgruntled nurses take me down. Isolde felt a surge of anger at his dismissal of their experiences. This isn't just about you, Victor. It's about creating a safe and respectful workplace for everyone. If you truly cared about your team, you would listen to their concerns instead of belittling them. Victor's face flushed, and the tension in the room reached a boiling point. The administrators exchanged glances, clearly weighing the implications of Victor's words against the testimonies they had heard. Dr. Chung spoke up again, her voice firm. Victor, we take these accusations seriously. If this is the culture you are perpetuating, we cannot allow it to continue. We are committed to fostering an environment that promotes respect and collaboration. Victor's eyes narrowed, a flicker of defiance crossing his features. You think you can just undermine me like this? I'll take this to the board. You'll regret this, Isolde. The threat hung in the air, but Isolde refused to back down. I'm not afraid of you, Victor. I've fought too hard and too long to let someone like you intimidate me. As the meeting continued, the administrators began to outline the next steps. They assured Isolde and her colleagues that they would conduct a thorough investigation into Victor's behavior and the culture within the hospital. They emphasized the importance of accountability and the need to ensure that everyone felt safe in their workplace. But as the meeting concluded, Isolde felt a sense of unease. Victor's threat lingered in her mind, and she knew he would stop at nothing to protect his reputation. She could feel the storm brewing, and she was determined to prepare for whatever was coming. After the meeting, Isolde and Lennox stepped outside, the cool air a welcome relief from the tension inside. "What do you think will happen now?" Lennox asked, concern etched on his face. "I don't know," Isolde replied, her voice heavy with uncertainty. "Victor isn't going to let this go easily. He'll fight back, and we need to be ready." Lennox nodded, determination shining in his eyes. "We'll stand together. You're not alone in this fight." As they walked through the hospital corridors, Isolde felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was ready to face Victor and the challenges that lay ahead. Change was never easy, but she was committed to fighting for a better future for herself, her colleagues, and the patients they served. The days that followed the meeting were a whirlwind of tension and uncertainty. Isolde Dubois could feel the weight of Victor Sterling's threat hanging over her like a dark cloud. Word of the investigation had spread throughout the hospital, and while many of her colleagues voiced their support, Isolde knew that Victor was not the type to let things go without a fight. As she walked into her shift one morning, Isolde was met with a mix of nervous smiles and sympathetic glances. The atmosphere in the ER felt charged, and she could sense the whispers that followed her as she moved through the bustling space. "Hey, Isolde," called out Clara, the junior nurse who had expressed admiration for her courage. "I just wanted to say I'm behind you 100%. You're doing the right thing." Isolde smiled warmly at Clara. "Thank you. It means a lot to have your support. We need to make sure our voices are heard." Just then, Victor strode into the ER, his presence commanding immediate attention. The energy in the room shifted as he approached the nurse's station, his expression a mask of cold disdain. Isolde felt a knot tighten in her stomach, but she clenched her fists, reminding herself of her resolve. "Good morning, everyone," Victor said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "I see the gossip mill is in full swing. How charming." Isolde met his gaze, refusing to look away. "We're discussing how to improve our work environment, Dr. Sterling. Perhaps you should listen instead of making snide comments." Victor's eyes narrowed, and the tension in the room thickened. "You're bold, Isolde, but just remember, it's a dangerous game you're playing." "I'm not afraid of you," Isolde replied, her voice steady. "I'm fighting for a better workplace, for everyone." With that, Victor turned on his heel, striding away with an air of superiority. Isolde felt a surge of adrenaline as the weight of their exchange settled within her. She had stood her ground, but Victor's threat lingered like a shadow, a reminder that he would not back down easily. Throughout her shift, Isolde poured herself into her work, focusing on her patients and the responsibilities she held. But as the day wore on, her thoughts kept drifting back to the investigation. She knew she had to keep gathering support from her colleagues to ensure that their voices would not be silenced. Later that week, Isolde organized a small meeting with the nursing staff during their break. She wanted to create a safe space for everyone to share their experiences and discuss how they could collectively push for change. As the nurses gathered, Isolde felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. "Thank you all for coming," Isolde said, her voice steady as she looked around the room. "I know things have been challenging lately, but we need to stand together. Our experiences matter, and it's time to make our voices heard." One by one, her colleagues began to share their stories. Instances of being undermined by Victor, feeling unsafe, or facing discrimination. The atmosphere shifted from apprehension to solidarity as they realized they were not alone in their struggles. "I thought I was the only one nurse admitted, tears in her eyes. "I felt so isolated working under him." Isolde nodded, her heart aching for her colleagues. "You're not alone. We have to support each other and advocate for ourselves. This is about more than just one person. It's about changing the culture in this hospital." As they brainstormed ways to present their findings to the administration, Isolde felt a renewed sense of hope. They discussed drafting a letter outlining their experiences and proposing actionable changes to improve the workplace environment. It was a small but significant step toward creating a united front. The following day, Isolde and her colleagues finalized their letter, each adding their signature as a show of solidarity. The act of coming together felt empowering, and Isolde could sense the shift in the air. They were no longer just victims of Victor's behavior. They were advocates for change. However, as they prepared to submit the letter, Isolde received an unexpected visit from the hospital's administration. Dr. Cheng entered the break room with a serious expression, drawing immediate attention. "Isolde, thank you for meeting with us," she began, her tone grave. "We wanted to inform you that we've conducted interviews and are taking your concerns seriously. However, we also need to address a serious allegation made by Dr. Sterling against you. Isolde's heart sank. What allegation? Dr. Chung hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Victor claims that you have been spreading false information about him and attempting to sabotage his career. The room fell silent, and Isolde felt the air leave her lungs. That's completely untrue. I've only shared my experiences and those of my colleagues. We need to investigate this claim as well, Dr. Chung continued. We want to ensure that all parties involved are treated fairly. Isolde's mind raced. Victor was attempting to turn the narrative against her, and she had to act quickly to defend herself. I can provide evidence of his behavior and the impact it has had on the staff. This is a tactic to intimidate me. Dr. Chung nodded, her expression sympathetic but firm. We need to see all sides of this situation. Please gather your evidence, and we will schedule another meeting. As Dr. Chung left, Isolde felt a surge of anger and determination. Victor was trying to undermine everything she had fought for, but she would not let him win. She would gather her evidence and present it to the administration, ensuring that Victor's tactics would not silence her or her colleagues. The following days were a blur of gathering testimonies and preparing for the next meeting. Isolde reached out to her fellow nurses, urging them to stand strong against Victor's tactics. As they shared their stories, a sense of solidarity emerged, fortifying their resolve. Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. Isolde entered the conference room, her heart racing, but her spirit unyielding. She was ready to confront Victor's lies and defend the truth. As Isolde Dubois stepped into the conference room, the weight of the moment pressed down on her. Today would determine not just her fate, but the future of countless nurses and staff members who had suffered in silence under Victor Sterling's reign of intimidation. She took a deep breath, steadying herself as she glanced around the room. Seated at the long table were the hospital's administration members, including Dr. Linda Cheng, who had been supportive throughout this ordeal. Victor sat at the far end, his expression a blend of arrogance and hostility. He seemed confident, perhaps even smug, as if he believed he could sway the outcome in his favor. Thank you all for coming, Dr. Chung began, her voice calm and authoritative. We are here to address the allegations made by both parties regarding workplace behavior. We take these matters very seriously. Isolde nodded, feeling the strength of her colleagues behind her. Lennox and several other nurses were present, their expressions resolute. They had gathered to support her, ready to stand against Victor's intimidation. Isolde, you have gathered testimonies and evidence regarding the impact of Dr. Sterling's behavior on the nursing staff. Please present your findings, Dr. Cheng said, gesturing for Isolde to begin. Isolde stood tall, her heart racing, but her voice steady. Thank you, Dr. Cheng. I appreciate the opportunity to share my experience and those of my colleagues. For too long, Dr. Sterling's behavior has created a toxic work environment. It is not just personal, it's systemic. She began to recount the instances of discrimination, intimidation, and the culture of fear that had taken root in the hospital. Supporting her claims, Isolde presented the testimonies from her fellow nurses, each one a powerful testament to the effects of Victor's actions. As she spoke, she could see the expressions on the administrators' faces shift from skepticism to understanding. The stories were compelling and the evidence undeniable. Isolde felt a surge of confidence as she continued, fueled by the support of her colleagues. Dr. Sterling has repeatedly undermined our authority, belittled our contributions, and fostered an environment where nurses feel unsafe speaking up, Isolde stated firmly. This affects not only our morale, but also the quality of care we provide to our patients. Victor's face darkened, and he rose to interject. These are just stories from disgruntled employees trying to tarnish my reputation. I have saved countless lives. I will not be brought down by a group of nurses with personal vendettas. Personal vendettas? Isolde echoed, her voice rising. This is about accountability, Victor. You've been given a position of power, and with that comes the responsibility to treat your colleagues with respect. Your actions have consequences. Dr. Chung raised her hand to silence Victor, her expression serious. We will not tolerate any further attempts to discredit the testimonies brought forth today. We take these allegations seriously, and we will conduct a thorough investigation. As the meeting continued, Victor's bravado began to crumble under the weight of the evidence presented. He launched into defensive rhetoric, but the tide had turned against him. Isolde could feel the momentum shifting, each testimony reinforcing the urgency of change. Finally, after what felt like hours, Dr. Cheng concluded the meeting. We will review all testimonies and evidence before making a decision. Rest assured, we are committed to fostering a workplace where all staff members feel safe and respected. As the meeting adjourned, Isolde felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over her. The support from her colleagues, the acknowledgement of their experiences, and the promise of change invigorated her spirit. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. As she and her colleagues exited the conference room, Lennox fell into step beside her. You did it, Isolde. You stood up to him, and you made your voice heard. I couldn't have done it without all of you, Isolde replied, her heart swelling with gratitude. We're in this together, and we will continue to fight for what's right. In the days that followed, the investigation into Victor's behavior unfolded, and the administration took steps to address the systemic issues within the hospital. Training sessions on workplace respect and inclusivity were scheduled, and a committee was formed to ensure that staff members could voice their concerns without fear of retaliation. Isolde watched as her colleagues began to feel empowered, inspired by the courage shown in their testimonies. The culture of silence began to dissipate, replaced by a collective commitment to foster a safe and collaborative environment. As for Victor, the administration imposed consequences for his behavior, mandating sensitivity training and reevaluating his position within the hospital. The once untouchable surgeon was now facing the repercussions of his actions, a reminder that no one was above accountability. Standing in the break room weeks later, surrounded by her colleagues, Isolde felt a profound sense of accomplishment. They had taken a stand against oppression, and together they had ignited a movement for change. Isolde, thank you for everything, Clara said, her voice filled with warmth. You've shown us that we can make a difference. Isolde smiled, her heart full. We did this together. This is just the beginning of a brighter future for all of us. As she looked around at her colleagues, she felt a sense of unity that she had never experienced before. They were no longer just nurses. They were advocates for change, and together they would continue to challenge the status quo. Isolde had faced down her fears, stood up to a powerful adversary, and emerged victorious. The fight for justice was far from over, but she was ready to lead the charge, armed with the belief that change was possible. You've made it to the end. If you enjoyed this story, I am confident that you'll love the next one appearing on the screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and please give this video a like. I'll see you in the next one.